Welcome to the very first episode of Heritage Happy Hour. My name is Tiffany and I'm here with my colleague Natalie, and together we're the team at Blue Willow Heritage. We are a specialist historic environment consultancy based up in North Yorkshire, and we specialise in facilitating planning and listed building consent applications. We do archaeological fieldwork and full-scale heritage consultancy from design stage through to submission. I've been in the industry for 10 years now, and I'm accredited with the Chartered Institute of Archaeologists at the highest level, which is MCFA. We have a team of 3 in the business, all of whom are also CIFA accredited. When I tell people I'm a heritage consultant, I usually get asked what that is. Certainly not as descriptive as architect or planning consultant, and not nearly as exciting as just archaeologist, although we are one of those as well. I thought we'd kick off this series with a bit about what a heritage consultant is, what we do, how our involvement can make a huge difference in projects, and when it might be a good time to think about contacting one. I'd just like to start off by saying that this is not purely a self-promotion episode for my business, but it's just to help showcase the value of heritage consultants in the profession as a whole. Many of my colleagues in the industry are also close friends of mine, and I believe we should all be lifting each other up. So in future episodes, we're going to be having guests including other consultants, architects, building surveyors, and planners to hopefully give our listeners a wide range of perspectives. So let's get into it. What is a heritage consultant? Now, the term heritage consultant can be a bit of a catch-all for several different positions within the field of heritage, and this includes archaeology, built heritage, and planning, but more often than not, it spans across all 3 disciplines. Most heritage consultants have a specialism in either below-ground archaeology or above-ground built heritage, but many also have experience in both, which can facilitate more complex schemes that require input on all aspects of heritage. Essentially, we feel that people with an archaeological background provide a more holistic approach to any heritage project, whether it's a building or below ground. Whatever our background or specialism, our role is very simple: to promote the sustainable development of historic buildings and sites, while ensuring that those elements which contribute most to their significance are either enhanced or preserved. Now, unfortunately, in the world of development, archaeologists and heritage consultants alike have been cast in the rather unfair role of being planning obstructions. Much like our fellow colleagues in ecology, transport, and other related fields, this is constantly in the news. Politicians love to sort of reference how we're halting development, but in all honesty, this could not be further from the truth. Our primary goal is never to obstruct development, but rather facilitate it in a way that balances the needs of our clients with the overarching aim of preserving the nation's rich archaeology and built heritage. This aim can achieve amazing results, taking the past and making it fit for both the present and future, which in turn is in line with both national and local policy. A good heritage consultant can also provide detailed, impartial advice on your proposed development at any stage of the process, whether you've just started out or you've already got full-fledged designs in place. But by providing this expert knowledge and tweaking designs here and there just to make them more acceptable from a heritage point of view, we can also ensure that our clients' needs are met, make a valuable contribution to your design team, and reduce the likelihood of objections on heritage grounds, which unfortunately is quite a common problem. So, why should you hire a heritage consultant for your next development project? The answer is really quite simple. We know planning law as it relates to heritage like the back of our hands. It's something that we have studied for years. We deal with it on a daily basis with case by case. And I think the unique nature of heritage as it relates to planning, especially how it's not uniform across the board, and it is a bit of a postcode lottery depending on who your conservation officer is, what the local policies are. It's just something that we have a lot of experience in. We can also help identify the constraints and opportunities specific to your project early on, so these can be mitigated from the start, which in turn this would save you time, money, and realistically unnecessary friction with the local planning authority, which can sometimes delay projects. I can't tell you how many times we've had someone come to us saying that only towards the end of their application, or worse, once they already had permission, their planning decision notice was absolutely chock full of conditions that related to heritage and archaeology, from requiring building recordings to archaeological fieldwork, which can be quite expensive, all of which could be dealt with earlier on had they come to us sooner. Essentially, by engaging with the heritage issues from the beginning, rather than ignoring them or trying to deal with them yourself, you'll be in a better position to put forward a scheme that is not only higher quality, but more likely to achieve successful planning permission. We found that for individual clients, a lot of them wish to tackle a listed building consent application on their own, and some schemes can be relatively straightforward to allow this. However, we found that even the most straightforward applications can be delayed or refused on heritage grounds that they'd previously not considered. And having an experienced heritage consultant on your team to provide advice along the way and engage with the local authority on your behalf can be the difference between a successful outcome on the first try and having to spend extra time or money on a second application or an appeal application following a refusal, which could have been completely avoided. Although we'll always try and make our clients' design proposals a reality, an experienced consultant should also be honest with you about which elements of your scheme are not acceptable from a heritage standpoint, and they should work with you and your design team, whether that be your architect, planning consultant, building surveyor, quantity surveyor, etc., to come up with a suitable alternative. They will also hopefully have good working relationships with local planning authority archaeologists, conservation officers, and governing bodies such as Historic England, so it can provide insider advice on how best to approach them. Some conservation officers, for example, have a bee in their bonnet about windows, and I'm sure that's a problem that a lot of our listeners have dealt with. It's best to know how to approach these particular issues with those particular people, as the strategy can sometimes change depending on who's going to be looking at the application. And this is not something that is widely available to the public. It's something that comes with years of experience and getting to know these people on a deeper level and understand what they are and aren't willing to accept. So I hope that's given you a bit of insight into who we are, what we do, and how we're here to help, not harm your development. And with that in mind, let's shift gears into the next section of our episode. Take it away, Natalie.
We recently asked our followers what some of their burning questions were around listed buildings, and we've handpicked a few of them to run through in today's episode. So let's get started. So Claire wanted to know what extent of a property is covered in the listing.
That's a really good question, Claire, and it's something that we get asked a lot. A lot of the people are under the impression that only what's specifically referenced in the listing description is protected, and we often hear statements like, only the outside of my house is listed, or only the fireplace and windows are listed. This is a common misconception, as when a building is listed, that level of protection applies to the entire building and any attached structures, whether those are historic or modern. This means that you would need listed building consent for any physical alterations, not just to the principal building, but any which are physically attached, and this includes things such as stone boundary walls or attached outbuildings. Depending on the property, such as country houses or large estates, the listing can also extend beyond the built fabric and cover things such as garden layouts, planting, and trees, although the latter are usually protected separately by tree protection orders.
Following on a little on what Tiffany said, the attached or extended regions of the property often fall under the curtilage of the principal listed building. In common law, curtilage is defined as the area of ground and building immediately surrounding or directly associated with a designated heritage asset. What comprises a curtilage will depend on the circumstances of the particular property, and not all listed buildings have associated curtilage listed assets. So basically, curtilage listing is where property, objects and structures are recognised as listed by virtue of falling within the curtilage of the principal listed building. Therefore, any curtilage listed assets are afforded the same protection and restrictions imposed upon the parent listed building. Typical structures which fall within curtilage listings include gardens, walled gardens, potting sheds, heated, historical greenhouses, agricultural barns and outbuildings historically belonging to the listed property. However, it does not mean that all such assets that belong to a listed building are automatically considered curtilage listed. Because of the ambiguous nature of curtilage listing, when undertaking any works, it is always best to check first to see if you will need listed building consent. So Gillian wanted some more information on the role of heritage consultants and how we can help current and prospective listed building owners.
This is something we've recently realised can be a bit of a minefield for home buyers, as we have several clients who've either purchased a listed building and inherited responsibility for unauthorised works, or it's their first time buying a listed property and they want to know more about what can and can't be done, what their responsibilities are, etc. In the first instance, if you've bought a listed property and after completion find out the previous owner undertook illegal works, these will need regularising, as unlike planning permission, the need for listed building consent does not lapse. One of our clients, for example, recently purchased a property in 2019 and later found out that the attached barn had been illegally converted in the 90s by the previous owner. So even though the work was done over 30 years ago by the previous owner, it is still the current owner's responsibility to get retrospective consent, and if they don't, they could be subject to enforcement action by the local council. We can't speak for every consultant out there, but as part of our services, we come on board to help clients get these types of works regularised so they can help put forward new applications without fear of reprisal and ultimately sell the property on if they wish. In general, if you own a listed building and are looking to make an application, then a heritage consultant like us can work with your architect to inform a design that is likely to be successful, producing a heritage statement in support of your scheme, and represent you in dealings with the local authority. For prospective listed building buyers, your heritage consultant can also accompany you on a viewing to run through any potential development options. For example, if you need more space, we can advise on the likelihood of an application for an extension getting approved and where the best location for this extension would be. They can also research the planning history of the property on your behalf and advise whether there are any unauthorised works, as this isn't always picked up on by conveyancing. This will save you both time and money, whether you decide to walk away from the sale or use the illegal works to negotiate money off the purchase price. Equally, if you're trying to sell your listed building and the buyer finds out about unauthorised works, we can help regularise these in a timely fashion so the sale doesn't fall through and everything is above board prior to completion. So whether it's your first listed building or you've always lived in one, getting a heritage consultant on board can help get your proposals through the planning process, whatever stage you're at. Emma would like to know, what kind of work requires listed building consent?
So this is a really important and frequently asked question. Determining if you need listed building consent is vital, as undertaking works to your home prior to obtaining listed building consent where it is needed is a criminal offence. In short, listed building consent is required for all proposed works to a listed building, which incorporates alterations, extensions, or partial or complete demolition that will impact upon the character or physical fabric of the listed building. Your heritage consultant can help you to determine what the significance of your home or site is and what is likely to be granted listed building consent within your scheme. Generally, for cosmetic and superficial alterations to the building, such as light interior decorating, you should be fine to proceed without listed building consent, obviously dependent upon the scope of the project. However, should any of your plans incorporate alterations to the fabric or character of the building, you will need listed building consent. If in doubt, it's always best to ask a heritage professional or the local authority directly prior to undertaking such works. So a few examples of works which may require listed building consent can be lifting floorboards to accommodate any repair works, installing new electrics, removing or inserting internal walling, removing fireplaces, repairing or replacing windows. However, that is not an exhaustive list of works requiring listed building consent. So Zoe kindly asked, can the grade of a listed building be reviewed in the hope that it might be downgraded? She's having trouble selling her house.
I think this is also a common misconception about the listing grades, that grade 2 star or grade 1 status automatically makes it more difficult to alter a property. The fact is that whether it's grade 1 or grade 2, the protection afforded by listing is the same. Only the criteria for listing changes, and this becomes more stringent for the higher grades. The other key differentiator is the level of significance, with a grade 1 listed building holding more architectural and historic value than a grade 2 listed building, and therefore there's more potential for that significance to be impacted, but ultimately the level of protection is the same. It is possible to have a listing reviewed, but this is commonly used for applying to delist a listed building, a process which is overseen by Historic England and only approved under exceptional circumstances. If you're having trouble selling a property because of its grade 2 star listed status, this is unlikely to be sufficient justification for demoting it to grade 2, unless the significance has seriously deteriorated over time. Even if it were, the protection is the same, and a higher listing grade doesn't preclude development or remodeling works. You just have to demonstrate that the significance will not be impacted to a meaningful degree as to result in any level of harm. Instead of trying to lower the grade, what sellers can do is put a buyer's mind at ease by pointing them in the direction of a heritage consultant or Historic England guidance on listed buildings, which more clearly outlines the rules and regulations, making the term listed a lot less scary for your buyers. Sue asks, why is there little consistency between the decisions of the conservation officers?
Firstly, local planning policy varies from district to district, meaning that each council will approach conservation differently. In many cases, the local planning policy provides little guidance on how to manage heritage assets. This means that planning decisions and any comments can be purely down to the conservation officer's discretion. On top of this, guidance provided by national planning policy and Historic England are also subjective, which does not guarantee a uniform approach to conservation throughout the country. Conservation officers are all eminently qualified in heritage planning and historic buildings, but can sometimes develop a blinkered view, especially on particularly contentious issues such as windows and extensions.
It's times like these that having a heritage consultant to fight your corner can be invaluable, as the planning case officer who ultimately makes the decision has to take our opinion on a scheme into account in order to undertake a balanced judgment. Although we represent our clients, Heritage consultants are ultimately an objective third party commenting on the merits of a scheme, and where a conservation officer erroneously objects to a development, we can make written representations on your behalf in response to their comments and oftentimes overturn the original objection, resulting in a successful permission. This is equally frustrating for heritage professionals as it is for listed building owners. At the end of the day, planning policy and guidance are subjective and open to interpretation, which is where a planning application can go from a tick box exercise to feeling more like an uphill battle, the likes of which are usually reserved for a courtroom. But it's important to bear in mind that conservation officers are not out to get you. They are first and foremost trying to protect these assets and ensure that any developments are sustainable and above board for ensuring their long-term conservation. They just have subjective information to work with, which, as with any industry, can lead to disputes, but most of them are willing to work with applicants to find a suitable solution. And that brings us to the end of our very first podcast. How do you think we did, Natalie?
I hope okay. Very scary.
Thanks again for joining us, and to everyone who submitted a question. We're sorry we couldn't get round to all of you, but hopefully we'll have plenty more opportunities to answer your questions.
Thanks again, and see you next time.